Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us today. We have a great registration for a terrific speaker. You can see that Melanie Lockert is the founder of the blog and the author of the book, Dear Debt. She has chronicled her journey of $81,000 in student loan debt, and we all have a tremendous amount to learn from her. Melanie, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
That's great. Let's go ahead and get started with a poll. We know that a significant amount of our attendees each month, because we do a free webinar each month, are new to financial social work. So we are going to check out just how familiar those of us in the audience today are with financial social work. And you can pick more than one. And this is interesting. This is a new poll question for us. We often ask you how you learned about the webinar or where you're joining us from. So about 70% of you have voted. We will give you just a few more seconds. I'll count it down because we have so much information for you. Okay, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. We'll go ahead and close this poll. And I'm glad I asked it. So a little less than a third of you are new to us, but more of you have attended one of our webinars. And some of you may be graduates or students right now, and a good percentage of you, take advantage of all the free materials that we offer on our financial social work website. Well, thanks, everybody. I enjoyed doing that. Let me close that. So, because we do always have new people, I will quickly go through the basics of financial social work. So, not only do you know who we are and what we do and why we do it, but you also understand why we put the time and effort and work into providing our whole financial social work community with these free monthly webinars. Financial health is about more than dollars and cents. And I created financial social work over the past 20 years. And in more recent years, probably the past 4 or 5, I've really been looking and considering this as financial health, financial wellness, financial well-being. It is absolutely about so much more than dollars and cents. And I think that it's the dollars and cents and that B word that no one likes for budget. So we want to think about wellness and health, and this is a more positive, holistic approach, and we believe that's what clients need because it's our relationship with money, whether it's our clients, ourselves, someone we care about. It's our relationship with money and with ourselves that determines our financial behavior. And for me, financial behavior incorporates how we earn, spend, save, share, and borrow. So if you think of those 5 components, you will recognize that they are the foundation for all of our financial circumstances. And you can see my little dancing arrow. This is where change happens. Sustainable long-term financial behavioral change. We have to change one of those components of behavior, how we earn, spend, share, save, or borrow. So when I talk about relationship with money and relationship with self, the self piece here is about self-awareness, self-esteem, self-respect. If your client doesn't feel good about him or herself, they're going to be a lot less likely to put in the time and effort to work at sustainable behavioral change, which I've shared with you, is about how we earn, spend, save, share, and borrow. And here, just to demonstrate, this is not, just about the dollars and cents of money. There's so much involved in how we earn, spend, save, share, and borrow. We talk here at the top, we have money, then we have self, which we've talked about. We talked about behavior. How about the other people in our lives, loved ones, children's, colleagues? What are they doing with their money? And society, we get such mixed messages, even from social media. And where we are in the life cycle plays a very significant role in everything having to do with our financial circumstances. And of course, health, physical health, mental health, emotional health, all of these are involved in our whole person financial health model, but involved in how each of us interacts with our money. And we do have on the website our new financial social work ebook, and this particular model is explained in it. And so throughout that life cycle, as I just mentioned, we want to begin exposing children age appropriately early on. And then by the preteen years, being able to talk to children about money. And by adolescence, having them engaged in hands-on and experiential learning. Then it's time for the practice and practical learning. And by adulthood, it's financial reality. Have we taken the steps previously required and reached a healthy financial situation? And in older adulthood, it's about passing it on, either passing on assets and definitely passing on the education, the things that we've learned over time. So financial social work is an ongoing, highly experiential behavioral model. It incorporates ongoing education, motivation, validation, and support. And over these 20 plus years, I've learned that that's what it takes to really, develop and help clients to develop sustainable long-term financial behavioral change. And the model is interactive, introspective, and strengths-based. It works individually with clients or with groups. And many of our graduates practice financial therapy and financial coaching using our model. It incorporates the psychodynamic financial social work model of transformational learning plus the trans-theoretical model of behavioral change. So I won't spend much time going into this now because we want to give Melanie as much time as possible for her presentation and to take your questions and answers. I do, just in winding down, want to say that if you think about it, your dollars and cents don't make your financial choices. They can't, it's not possible, but we each have an inner money self, and financial social work explores that inner money self so that we make better friends with our money and with ourselves. So financial circumstances originate from within the inner money self, and your inner money self includes your thoughts, feelings, and actions with your money and with yourself. So money is not the problem. It's our relationship with it that poses that problem. So I think I've pretty much made this point, and I'm just about to hand it off to Melanie. So you need to know that financial well-being does require a healthier inner money self, because someone with a healthier money self engages more readily, is more hopeful, is more eager to change, and more prepared to succeed. And best of all, that someone is at peace with his or her money. And for me, that's what we try to do with all of our students and graduates, our financial social work community, is to help you find peace with your money. And now I'm really excited to turn this over to Melanie, who's going to talk to you about how to become a student debt survivor. And she will
Yes.
tell you more about herself. Take it away, Melanie.
Yes, I'm excited to be here.
We're excited to have you.
So yes, we are going to be talking about how to become a student debt survivor today. I know that student loan debt is something that so many of us deal with. Probably a lot of your clients deal with that as well. And so I'm excited to share my story, hopefully provide you guys some hope and some actionable advice on what to do next and how to survive student loan debt. So who am I and why am I qualified to even talk about this stuff? First, I would like to say that I am not a financial professional and I'm not a CFP, so do not take anything I say as advice, but I'm just sharing my experiences and what I know. But I did borrow a total of $81,000 for my bachelor's and my master's degree. And probably in total, I paid off 100 grand if you consider the interest as well. And in 2011, I graduated from NYU and I still had $68,000 in student loan debt. It was really funny. I created a mint.com account and synced up all of my debt and my bank accounts and everything. And I saw that I had $68,000 in student loans and I panicked. I felt like I was going to have an anxiety attack. And the next day I deleted my mint.com account and I just said, I can't deal with this right now. It's too stressful. I don't know what to do. And, you know, any good denial story, you know, you can never deny things for too long. You know, 6 months later, I still didn't have a full-time job and I couldn't really afford to live in New York and pay my student loan. So I made a very difficult decision. I moved to Portland, Oregon. My then partner was there and we shared a very small studio apartment, and I thought, I'm going to be a big fish in a small pond. And that didn't really work out. I found jobs for $10 to $12 an hour. I was only doing temp jobs and I ended up on food stamps for a brief period, and I was broke and depressed, and pretty much all of 2012 crying and depression just punctuated all of my days. And I started to raid the savings that I did have to continue to pay down debt because I just felt like it was this monster consuming my life. And, you know, after a year of being very depressed and talking to so many people about it, I just started getting annoyed and frustrated with myself, with everything. And I said, how can I channel this energy? Because clearly I'm spending a lot of mental energy, a lot of time focused on this debt. What can I do to turn this into positive energy? And so in January 2013, I decided that I had no choice but to get out of debt. There was absolutely no other option for me. And I started deardebt.com to keep myself accountable in the debt payoff process. And Dear Debt is my blog, and I started writing, and every month I would share updates about how much I paid off, and I would share about my temp jobs and how I did eventually get a full-time job at a nonprofit later, making 31 grand, but then how through side hustling because of my blog, a year later after that job, I quit to be self-employed, and I'm currently a full-time freelance writer and event planner. I plan specifically events for women. I have a retreat called Lola Retreat, which is an intimate experience and retreat that happens over 3 days, and it's all about the basics of money, and it's so wonderful. But all of this has come from my blog. So my blog has completely changed my life and led to this new career and led to this book, and also led to me paying off my debt. In December 2015, I made my last student loan payment. But pretty much what made that possible was earning more, was side hustling. I turned my blog into freelance writing gigs, into event planning gigs. I was a pet sitter. I was a babysitter. I worked a rave one night and sold water bottles to sweaty dancers. I did pretty much anything that was legal to make money and to pay off my debt. And so, you know, I paid off my debt in December 2015, and it was not an easy transition. I had to let go of a lot of kind of issues around my money mindset around student loans. You know, everyone says student loans are the good debt. I mean, okay, technically they're not the worst debt, but I really had to say, no, student loans are not the good debt. No debt is good debt. So I had to get rid of that mindset. You know, there's also, everybody has student loans. Why worry? And that kind of statement led me to be complacent. So I had to get rid of all of these mindsets around student loans. I also had to get rid of this idea of what my life should look like at a certain age. I was in my late 20s, early 30s during this period. A lot of my friends were getting married, having kids, buying houses. You know, I was sharing a very small studio apartment in Portland, Oregon, paying $400 in rent. I didn't have any health insurance at the time. I didn't have a car. I barely went out. And like I said, I was on food stamps briefly. And so, you know, I really kind of lived like a college student. I was probably living, you know, better when I was 21 than I was at 28. But, you know, it was all worth it because I paid off my debt and I'm student loan free and I'm a student loan debt survivor. And I can't tell you how sweet it is to not have my money be going to a payment every single month. And I always say that, you know, being debt free, you can pay for your future and not your past, right? You know, when you're paying your debt, you're paying your past. You want to pay your present and your future. So it's really important to get out of debt and to help others get out of debt as well. So let's face the facts first. Student debt is at an all-time high of $1.5 trillion. That's among 44 million student loan borrowers. And what's horrible is that the student loan crisis disproportionately affects women and people of color. There are many articles that confirm that, and it's, you know, just one extra thing besides the wage gap and besides racism that we have to deal with already. There is a relationship between student loan debt and depression. And I know that personally because I was very depressed and anxious when I was paying off my debt. I've read studies about the link. In a Psychology Today article, I read that people that die by suicide, they're 7 times more likely to be in debt. This is another reason that in September, I organize a suicide prevention blog tour where I get all of my personal finance blogger friends to write about debt and depression and suicide and how debt is not a death sentence. And, you know, you are not alone, L-O-A-N, and you are not alone, A-L-O-N-E. You are not alone. You are not alone. And I think that's so important for people to know because it can feel all-consuming and people feel hopeless. And of course they would feel hopeless when there's 1 out of 6 graduates have debt levels that exceed their income. I want to do a quick poll. So I think that I would like to see where you guys are at with your student loan knowledge. So let's see, how much student debt do you think the average college graduate has? Some good answers. Give it to 20 seconds. And I'm going to close the poll. And we're going to share the results. So a lot of you, 75% said more than 30,000, which is the correct answer. The typical student loan borrower has $37,000 in student loan debt, and that is the average. So that's quite a high amount when you're just getting started in your financial life. So let's go back to the presentation. 1 second. So how can we take steps to pay off student loan debt? In my book, Dear Debt, I liken paying off student loan debt to the 5 stages of grief. It typically starts with denial. I told you my story of denial, how I completely just deleted my mint.com account because I could not face the numbers. It made me physically ill. I didn't want to look at it. And so when you're in denial, you're not acknowledging the debt, you're burying your head in the sand, you just don't want to deal with it. But really, to counteract that, you have to know what you owe. It's really important to know exactly how much you owe, down to the penny, so that you can create an accurate plan to move forward. And this can often be the most painful part, especially, if you're really far in denial and you just don't want to deal with it. This can be extremely painful, but it's the necessary first step that you must take. In order to create a debt path plan, you have to know how much you owe. If you don't know kind of where to get started, you can go to the National Student Loan Data System, where you can find federal student loan information. Private loan information can be found with your lender or on a credit report. Pro tip, you can get a free credit report at annualcreditreport.com. That is a good tip with or without student loans. You can check and make sure there are no errors in your credit report. So that's step one. Step two, you want to list out all of your balances and interest rates in ascending order. You want to know, okay, I owe $20,000 at 6.8%. I owe $15,000 at 7.9%. I owe $10,000 at 2.3%. Whatever that may be, you want to know exactly what you owe with the corresponding interest rates, and I'll tell you why in a little bit why that is important. You want to list that all out. And step three, you also want to choose a repayment plan with your loan servicer. Your loan servicer is not necessarily your lender. Your loan servicer is the person the company that you pay and that makes payments on your behalf. They're pretty much the middleman between your student loans and you make the payments to them. So if you do not choose a repayment plan, borrowers will automatically be enrolled in a standard repayment plan, which spreads out payments over 10 years. I'm talking about federal student loans here, by the way. There are plans like the extended repayment plan that have a repayment period of 25 years. This can lower monthly payments but accrue more interest. Another option is income-driven plans. Can be used if your monthly payments are too high and unmanageable. If you want to kind of understand what your monthly payments will look like, if you go to studentloans.gov, you can check the repayment estimator to see what plan is right for you. I recommend being on the standard repayment plan because you want to get out of debt as soon as possible. If your debt is incredibly unmanageable and you just can't even pay it, I recommend signing up for an income-driven plan. I have a friend who, was not making a lot of money and signed up for an income-driven plan, and they actually paid $0 because there's a ratio that kind of determines your payment, and they determined that he was not making enough money to even qualify to make a payment, so his payment was $0. But by signing up for an income-driven plan, he was still in good standing with his student loans, even though it was $0. And of course, with an extended repayment plan, you can have a longer repayment period, which means lower monthly payments, but that means you're going to be paying more over time. I really encourage you to check with the calculators that are online how much you're going to be paying in interest. A lot of the times with these 25-year repayment terms, your student loans pretty much double because of interest in a lot of cases. And you don't want to do that. You definitely don't want to do that. I think, one of the things that really motivated me to pay off debt was I did the math and my student loans were costing me $11 a day. And when I did the math, I thought, wow, that's $300+ a month. That is a flight from New York to LA every month. I love travel, so I always contextualize things with things that I could buy or things I could do. And I thought I could be traveling once a month cross country, but instead I'm flushing it down the toilet in interest. And so that made me really mad, and that encouraged me to pay off debt. So there are a variety of ways to get motivated to pay off debt, and you have to figure out which is your motivation. Anger really helped me because I didn't want to keep wasting my money. Step 4, you want to choose a debt repayment strategy. So there's the debt avalanche method, which is the method that I employed with my student loans. And pretty much what you do with that is you focus on your highest interest debt first while paying the minimum on the rest. So of course you want to stay in good standing with all of your loans, so pay the minimum on all of your loans. But if you have extra money, if you want to put more money towards the high interest debt, do that. So for me, You know, I paid off my 7.9% interest debt first, and then I moved on to my 6.8% debt, and then I moved on to my 2.3%. And the debt avalanche is great because it will save you money and interest. There's also the debt snowball method, which focuses on the smallest balance first. So let's say if you have $15,000 in debt and then $20,000 and then $30,000, you want to focus on that $15,000 balance first and get rid of the smallest balance and then focus on the rest. And pretty much what this does is this can provide quick motivational wins. When you kind of get rid of the smallest balance first, you get motivated, you get excited, you start seeing your balance go down. So the debt avalanche is about math, saving money on interest. The debt snowball is about motivation. I have two other repayment strategies that I mentioned in my book, Dear Debt. Pay the debt that will help you sleep best at night. This can go for any kind of debt, like if you have credit card debt, but with student loan debt, maybe you hated your college experience at, one particular school or one, loan in particular, maybe your private student loans just make it difficult to sleep well at night. Pay that off first. Your peace of mind is so important. You can also pay off the debt that anchors you the most. As I said, I used anger to fuel my motivation to pay off my debt. So it's really important to find out what motivates you. Is it saving money on interest or making quick progress? Or is it peace of mind? You really want to find what that is, and there's no right or wrong way to pay off student loans as long as you are consistent. Step 5, you want to start making those payments and continue to make payments. If you want to pay down the debt even faster, here are some tips. You want to make bi-weekly payments instead of monthly payments. Even if you cut your monthly payment in half and don't even increase your monthly payments, making bi-weekly payments can cut down on interest. Your student loan debt accrues interest daily, so make bi-weekly payments. Throw all your extra money towards debt. So if you get tax refunds, birthday money, raises, put it all towards debt. Don't increase your lifestyle. Cut out unnecessary expenses. I know this is really hard. No one likes to do this. I mean, it's not fun to downgrade your lifestyle when you're used to living a certain way, but just remember that this is temporary. I spoke earlier to Rita about a debt-free dream list. So when I was paying off debt and kind of struggling and thinking, why am I doing this? I have so long to pay off debt. I'm not even going to get debt-free in a year. I'm going to be debt-free in like 4 or 5 years, and I'm paying $1,000+ a month. Like, this sucks. And it was awful. But I created a debt-free dream list of all the things I wanted to do once I was debt-free. That included moving back to LA, which I have done. That included going to Italy with my mom, which I have done. That included getting cats, which I have done. All of those things I did not do, even though I really wanted to when I was paying off debt, because I knew I had to live as minimally as possible to pay off debt. But knowing what I was working towards really helped me maintain motivation. So I encourage you to create a debt-free dream list. You can do that on Pinterest. You can create a secret Pinterest board with all of the fun things that you're going to do once you pay off debt. I also recommend putting your student loan balance on your credit card and debit card. So every time you spend money, you see how much you owe still, and is this a good idea? So you really, want to have these hacks in mind to pay down debt. You want to cut down unnecessary expenses. If you don't need it, then cut it out. You really want to have as few wants as possible and really focus on the needs. Needs are, I need to pay rent and live somewhere. I need to eat and go grocery shopping. I need to pay for insurance. Those are the needs. But you don't have to go to the movies. You don't have to go out to eat. You don't have to buy, technology gadgets. So cut out unnecessary expenses. Know that it's temporary. You don't always have to do that. You can also adjust your tax withholding. If you're used to getting a big tax refund every year, you can adjust your tax withholding and start getting more money each month so that you can pay off more debt. Like I said, I'm not a financial professional or a CPA, so if you're concerned about how that will affect your taxes, please talk to a professional. You can also sell your items that you no longer want. So we all have stuff that kind of accrues dust and gets in the corner and we think that it's really great and then we don't end up using it. You can sell your items on Craigslist, on OfferUp, Poshmark, Facebook Marketplace, even in a yard sale if you have a yard. You know, sell your items and make more money and throw that towards debt. You can also take on a side hustle, work for Uber, Lyft, Postmates, Instacart, TaskRabbit, Rover, and Care. Like I said, I was a side hustle queen paying off debt because I had cut back pretty much every expense that I could. You know, I was sharing a studio apartment. I didn't have insurance. I didn't have a car. I was on food stamps. Like, there was no way I could cut back on my expenses anymore, you know? And so you might hit a plateau at some point where you're like, okay, I've cut everything out. Now what? Like, I'm still not even making enough to put, you know, what I want towards my payments. And I hit that plateau. And I realized I had no other option but to make more money, because clearly making $10 to $12 an hour at a temp job was not going to make the progress that I wanted. And so one of the main side hustles that I did was I was a brand ambassador. So if you're an extrovert and like talking to people, a brand ambassador is a great side hustle. A brand ambassador is pretty much someone, you know, if you go to a concert or go to a sporting event and people are handing out free coupons and free samples, that's a brand ambassador. Pretty much it's the face of a brand at a public event. And it was actually really fun. I got to go to a lot of concerts, a lot of fun events. I got a lot of free swag. And typically the pay was between $17 and $25 an hour. And it's really flexible. Of course, if you're in a bigger city, being a brand ambassador is easier. You know, I did it in LA, New York, and Portland, and, you know, those are pretty good markets. So I would recommend looking on Craigslist and also event marketing websites. You can sign up for certain marketing agencies and get started as a brand ambassador. So that's something that I did. I also worked as a pet sitter for some of my friends and colleagues. I just let people know that I was looking to make more money if they needed any help. So sometimes it's just about asking, because people are not a mind reader. So, you know, they might need some extra help and they don't know that you're available or interested. So just say, hey, you know, casually, if you need a pet sitter, I'm available, you know, whatever. Just be sure to ask so that people know. The key to getting out of debt is consistency. I know this is such a boring answer, but this is so true. You know, people always want, like, what's the secret to getting out of debt? What's the magic recipe? How can you do it? You know, people want to know if there's like some secret thing that, you know, people can't figure out. But really, the magic is in being consistent. It's just making payments every single month and hopefully paying way more than the minimum. You know, don't get stuck in this minimum payment trap. When I was just paying off my undergrad loans before I went to grad school, I just paid the minimum on my student loans, even though I could totally afford to pay more. But I thought, oh, this is the minimum payment. This is what I pay. I just thought of it as a bill. I didn't even think about paying more towards my debt until I went to grad school and I got in a lot more debt. So if you can just pay the minimum, then pay the minimum. But if you can afford to pay more than the minimum, then do that. Even if it's just $25 more, even if it's just $50 more, even if it's just $10 more, pay more than the minimum. And really, getting out of debt is about consistency. You know, it's like anything that's worthwhile. If you want to get fit and work out, you have to be consistent. If you want to, you know, get on a better eating habit, you have to be consistent. It's all about consistency. So let's do another poll. I want to see where you guys are at. Let's see, what percentage of college graduates are currently in student loan default? I want to see where you guys are at. Default means that it's been more than 270 days since you've made a payment. I'm pretty sure that's the definition. I don't have it pulled up, but from my articles that I've written in the past, I'm pretty sure that's what it is. You haven't made a payment for quite a while, and it's now not even just delinquent, it is now in default. And that means that debt collectors can come after you. So we're going to close the poll and share the results. So actually the correct answer is 22%. So 22% of college graduates are currently in student loan default. So 25% are right on the mark, but that's interesting that 53% of you thought it was more than 25%. And that kind of just shows us where we are at with student loans. You know, people are having a tough time managing it and not making payments. Let's go back to the presentation. So, back to kind of default. That happens because people can't afford to pay off their student loans and they feel like they don't have options and they don't want to deal with it. So what if I have a low income or can't pay my student loans? You want to always communicate with your loan servicer. They seem like the enemy, but they can help you stay in good standing and advise you on best options. So if you lost your job and you can't pay, if you're struggling to make payments on your current plan, contact your loan servicer. It's so important to stay in touch with them because you want to stay in good standing with your student loans. You can consider an income-driven plan. So, when I was really broke in Portland and I was making $10 to $12 an hour and on food stamps, I could have been on an income-driven plan and probably have paid $0. But because I was obsessed with getting out of debt, I rated my savings at that point to pay off my debt. I don't necessarily recommend that, but that is what I did because I didn't want to get an income-driven plan because I felt like I would get too comfortable. And for me, getting out of student loan debt, I had to be a little bit uncomfortable. You know what I'm saying? I had to push myself, like, what's the limit of me going a little too far and like paying this off? And like, I wanted to be uncomfortable. So that's just me. But, if you must, an income-driven plan can really be a lifesaver. An income-driven plan caps your payments to 10 to 20% of your discretionary income. There's the revised pay-as-you-earn plan. There's the income-based repayment, income contingent repayment. There are several different plans that you can look at that are a little bit different, but they all pretty much cap your payments at a certain percentage. And like I said, if you really aren't making that much money, it could even be $0. And so even though you're not paying anything, you're still in, quote, good standing with your student loans because you're on a plan, and that's what they have decided your payment is. So if you're truly struggling and you have federal student loans, I recommend going on an income-driven plan. You can also consider deferring your loans, which puts your payments on a temporary hold. Once again, you have to contact your loan servicer to do this. If you need to change your repayment plan or defer your student loans, you have to go through your loan servicer. A lot of people might think like, oh, I just won't pay and maybe it'll happen automatically or, it'll be fine. But no, you have to communicate and take action. You can also consider the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program or student loan forgiveness through an income-driven plan. So the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program, pretty much you work for 10 years in the public sector and you can get your loans forgiven. If you still have a balance after 20 to 25 years on an income-driven plan, you can get your student loans forgiven. So to qualify for Public Service Loan Forgiveness, you must work at an eligible organization. There are some forms online about certifying your eligibility, which is really important to do. And, of course, you have paperwork to fill out after the 10 years. And, unfortunately, we are at a place where so much is changing with student loan legislation. Hopefully, in 10 years, the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program is still around. This year, I think, actually, 2017 was the first year that people were eligible for forgiveness. And based on my research, I don't think people have actually gotten their loans forgiven quite yet, but the Department of Education has received, thousands of applications for student loan forgiveness. So it's definitely something you want to keep tabs of and what's actually going on with legislation and where that's at. On an income-driven plan, like I said, any outstanding balance will be forgiven at the end of the repayment period. But here's the thing. If you get your loans forgiven with a public service loan forgiveness, you will not have to pay tax on the amount that is forgiven because you've done a service for 10 years. Under the income-driven plan, if you still have money left over after 20 to 25 years, your debt will be forgiven, but you'll be taxed on that. So let's say you have $30,000 forgiven, you're going to be taxed on that. And, of course, that will vary depending on your tax situation and a bunch of other variables, so I can't necessarily guesstimate how much you would owe, but it's going to be money. And so if you're not expecting that, it can be quite a lot. So just be sure that you're aware of that. You want to avoid delinquency and default and wage garnishment. So delinquency is, you've missed a payment and you continue to miss payment. It goes into default, I believe, after 270 days. Once it's in default, it can be turned over to debt collectors and your wages can be garnished. And that means that money can be taken legally out of your paycheck. And actually, I have a funny story about that. About 10 years ago, I was a manager at a nonprofit, and unfortunately, I had to give a letter to one of my employees about their student loans being garnished, and it was quite uncomfortable for both of us. And that was actually the first time I knew that even happened. And, seeing it in action, it's not fun for the employer or the employee. And, it takes a bite out of your paycheck. And so that will bring us to the next poll. If you default your student loans, what percentage can the federal government withhold through administrative wage garnishment? So yes, if you don't pay off your student loans, the government can go after your checks. They may even go after your tax refund. They will get their money. And also, I've heard of people's Social Security checks being garnished when they're older, which is horrible. So you can't really escape student loan debt, which is why it's so important to create a plan, because you don't want to be an older person having your Social Security checks garnished. So we're going to close the poll and share the results. So the actual answer is 15%, which actually is the winning answer. So congratulations, that is correct. So if you have your student loans in default and it gets to collections and they choose to take money, it will be 15%. So that's not an insignificant amount of money. Okay, let's, I think, hide the results now. I'm gonna do this. So, I've talked a lot about federal student loan payments, and you're probably thinking, well, what's the options for private student loan borrowers? Unfortunately, there are not many protections for private student loan borrowers. There's not income-driven plans. There's not student loan forgiveness, that's for sure. You may be able to defer your student loans with a private loan borrower, but it depends. Because they are a private company, like a bank or a financial institution, it is their rules, right? The federal government is the Department of Education. They have set standards for student loan forgiveness and a variety of repayment plans. But if you have private loans, it's a private company, it's their rules. So unfortunately, there aren't many of these protections. And so if you're having trouble making payments and you have private loans, you should really talk to your lenders about your options. I also really encourage people to pay off private student loans first because there aren't many protections. And also if you have a co-signer, it's really important that you get them released at some point. There's a lot of kind of struggles that can happen if you have a co-signer. For example, I've heard of cases where a borrower might die and then the co-signer might be on the hook for the entire balance immediately. Or I think I've heard of the reverse as well. If the co-signer dies, then the borrower might be responsible for the entire balance right away. So, a co-signer is someone that's legally responsible for your debt if you are unable to pay. So if that's someone like your grandma, your grandpa, your mom, your dad, eventually you want to get a co-signer release so they are not liable for your debt should anything happen. Usually private student loan lenders have a process for co-signer release. They have, paperwork to fill out. You might have to prove that you've made payments for 1 to 2 years. You might have to prove your income and that you are eligible and available to make payments on your own. So another thing I want to talk about is dealing with debt and depression. As I've talked about my own experience being extremely depressed and feeling so low, I felt depressed because I went to this fancy private college and got in all this debt. I couldn't find a job afterwards to even pay it back. I felt like my debt was my self-worth, which means like I was negative 68,000. I just felt so negative and low in my self-worth. But eventually I had to come to the realization that you are not your debt. Your debt does not make you a bad person. It's something that you did. It's something that you accrued. And especially with student loans, you are doing your best and trying to further your education. So don't beat yourself up about how much debt you are in. You are definitely not alone. It's a national problem. It's a growing problem, which is why I think Dear Debt has, become so popular, because a lot of people are dealing with this. Debt does not define your self-worth. I also consider getting professional help. So when I was really depressed in 2012 and crying every day, I knew I needed professional help, and I couldn't really afford it. So at the recommendation of a friend, I realized that Portland State University offered low-cost counseling with their grad students. So these were people that were basically one semester away from being certified and graduating. And they had, a professional that they were kind of guided under. And I was totally fine with that. And sessions technically were $15 a session, but I negotiated it down to $5 because I was like, hey, I'm on food stamps and really broke. And they were open to that. And so you might want to consider low-cost counseling at a local college. You can also check out openpathcollective.org. I'm currently in counseling again, and I have found my therapist through Open Path Collective. You can typically find a therapist between $30 to $50 per session. I know that's still kind of a lot, but out-of-pocket prices can often be, over $100 an hour for therapy. So it's respectively affordable. So I would check out that as well. And you can write a breakup letter to debt. So pretty much my whole website, Dear Debt, is this concept of breaking up with debt. Dear Debt is kind of like the Dear John concept, like, Dear Debt, I'm so over you, we're done. And, I've kind of explored my relationship with debt and written various Dear Debt letters. I've invited people who are in debt to write breakup letters, and they're more than welcome to publish them on my site. I don't edit any of my Dear Debt letters on the website, and some of them are incredibly heartbreaking. Some of them are funny. Some of them are silly. Some of them are just profound. And I think people don't really sit down to think about their relationship to debt and how much it has affected them. And so you can write a breakup letter to debt. And if you want to publish it on my site, you're more than welcome to. I think it can be quite a cathartic exercise. And you can also find support groups online through blogs with friends. I can tell you with 100% certainty, I would not have paid off my debt without my blog. My blog kept me accountable to my readers every single month. They were encouraging me. I was reading other people who were also in the same situation. We were cheering each other on and saying, you can do it, you can do it. And having that support really meant a lot, because we don't really talk about debt a lot in our daily lives or with anybody. And so, when you're in a space where you feel comfortable to talk about your debt and depression and your progress and your setbacks, that's really where you can grow. So I encourage you to find a community that can help support you in this. So that's my presentation. If you have any questions, you can feel free to email me at deardebt@gmail.com. You can also find me on deardebt.com. I'm on Twitter at deardebtblog, Instagram at deardebt, and if you want to learn more about my Women and Money Retreat, that is lolaretreat.com. So I will hand this back to Rita. Hopefully that was helpful for you guys. Let me change the presenter to Rita.
Okay. I thought that was wonderful. Thank you so much. I think our audience did too. We're going to get right to the Q&A in just a minute and a half here. I wanted to tell you all about our certification program at the Center for Financial Social Work. You can see that our graduates, as I might have said, are across the country and around the world. And we are in the online encyclopedia of social work. We're in Wikipedia. And it's a self-study, self-paced 6-month program with an online exam that has 2 weeks to complete. I wanted to alert you all to You can see we try and schedule our webinars 3 months out. Next month, I will be doing the webinar on a new mental health resource, online money support groups for women. So that actually ties in with you, Melanie. I hadn't realized that. But
Yeah, I love that.
we'll have to talk about that. And then
Yeah.
for October, we'll have Surviving the Holiday Season Financially Unscathed, which is a really good thing to do. Some of you mentioned that you do read our free monthly download on our website. And we also have our new edition of the Financial Social Work ebook on the website. So here is our contact information at the Center for Financial Social Work and all of Melanie's wonderful contact information. So I am going to open up the Q&A. Okay, so here, can separate payments be made straight to the principal of the debt, Melanie?
That's a really good question. So sometimes the lender might have their own preference of paying, like their kind of order of paying. So I would talk to your lender and say, I specifically want to pay the principal on this loan, because they typically have their own kind of way of paying them in order. So I would talk to your loan servicer and say, I specifically want this money to go to the principal of this account first. They may or may not be able to accommodate that, but from my experience, they can typically do that.
Okay, great. If I've been working in a nonprofit for over 10 years, but my loans are in default, is there such a program as could help me? Oh, the questions are really coming in now. Wait, they disappeared. Okay.
I think I got that question. So if your student loans are in default and you've already worked in the nonprofit sector for over 10 years, so the first thing you have to do is get your student loans out of default and get them rehabilitated. So there are several ways to do that. If you Google online about how to get out of default and kind of rehabilitate your student loans, there are some steps you can take to do that. But the first thing you must do is get your student loans in good standing, because any payment plans, especially any forgiveness, will not be available to you until your student loans are in good standing. Unfortunately, these plans aren't available retroactively. So, if you've already worked 10 years in nonprofit, unfortunately, if you haven't been tracking it with the eligibility, it's not retroactive. So you would have to start today. And, if you're continuing a career in nonprofit and you're going to work another 10 years, that's definitely a viable option. But right now, I would say focus on getting your student loans out of default and rehabilitated.
Excellent advice, Melanie. Are you looking at the Q&A, Melanie? Or do you want me to feed them to you?
What?
Okay. So someone said, I feel a lot of shame surrounding the student debt that I accumulated. Wow. All these questions are coming in. They're disappearing. I work for a state agency and have applied for... I can't read the rest.
We want to address that shame question. I think that's a really important one. Whoever said they have a lot of shame around student loan debt, I can say I definitely 100% understand what you are saying. I felt so much shame about my student loan debt because, like I said, I chose to go to a fancy private college. I chose to get a ridiculous major in performance studies. I did all of these things, and I just felt like I made the mistake and that I'm dumb and I'm in so much student loan debt because it's my fault. And I just was on this kind of shame spiral, right? But you can't internalize that. What happened has happened. You're in student loan debt, and it's not fun. But the longer that you internalize that shame, it's going to take that much longer to actually take action. And I think that's why all of 2012, I was just in a depressive rut, and I was just felt paralyzed by my debt. And then I just got frustrated, and I was like, I can't do this anymore. And that's when I started my blog. So you have to get out of the shame spiral so that you can take action. So forgive yourself for getting into student loan debt. Realize that you probably had to take out student loans to go to college. I know I did. That this is a national problem and that you're not alone, and that there's no reason for you to carry that burden. Don't carry an unnecessary burden. Instead, take action.
There's another piece to that, Melanie, and everybody in the audience, which is, how do we allow men and women in this country, young people, to go to college without teaching them any of this information? We do such a terrible job. We have parents who don't feel confident or competent teaching their children about money. We have high schools that don't require, for the most part, don't require any personal finance, any kind of education or teaching about the long-term effects of student debt. And nobody anywhere is addressing it. So should we?
Yeah, we have to do a better job educating on the front end, because I know when I signed up for my student loans, I had no idea about principal balance. I had no idea how interest worked. I didn't know about my payment plans. Like, I had no idea. So yeah, I think we definitely need to do a better job, in our communities to educate other people and, kind of educate people on the front end about that, and also maybe encourage them to pay interest only while they're in school, even if it's just $50 a month. That can make a big difference.
One other thing that you didn't mention, but I'm very familiar with from clients, is living off of student loans that you're not using for coursework. And
yeah, I think it's super important to only take out what you need. Like, for example, when I went to NYU, they offered me like $89,000, and I did the math and I was like, okay, well, my tuition is $52,000, and how much do I need to live in New York for this year while I'm still working part-time? And so I ended up rejecting about $30,000 in student loans, because I was like, I don't need all of that. It would have been so easy for me to be like, oh, 89 grand, I can just live it up in New York this year. But I was like, no, I don't want to take on any extra debt that I don't need. So I just took out what I needed to pay my tuition and whatever I needed to close the gap to live in New York. I did work part-time while I was in school, which I think is important for a lot of people as well.
I have to tell you, that makes me angry. I didn't take student loans, but that makes me angry. And anybody who's still with us, if you're looking for something to be angry about and motivate you to pay those loans, as Melanie suggested, wow, how come somebody didn't teach us that? Okay, let's see if we can do another question or two. Someone did share. Fantastic presentation. Thank you, Melanie. Just wanted to mention that you didn't mention loan forgiveness due to a handicap. I had $100,000 forgiven because of a handicap. Okay.
Yes, that is a good point. There is disability and forgiveness in certain situations. So I would definitely look into that. I know it's quite a process. So I think it's wonderful that someone mentioned that. And if they're available to talk as a resource, I think that's important, because there is information about how to get your student loans forgiven due to disability online, but I think it's more rare to actually hear from people that have actually done it. So I think that person should definitely be a resource for everybody else who might need that.
And Rita and Melanie, if you could address this question before we leave, and there are certainly some really good ones, but someone asked, they have a very low income single mom of 2 children who makes less than $10,000 a year. Her income tax refund is being taken every year for several years. What is your best advice for her?
At this point, I would definitely say get on an income-driven plan so that, your payments would likely be $0 given your current income. And while that's not something you want to keep forever, that will help you be in a sustainable mode for now and in good standing with your student loan debt. And I think at this point, kind of the plateau that I hit You have to focus on earning more. And so, I don't know your current work situation, but if you can ask for a raise at your job, I would do so. You should definitely always ask for a raise. Like I said, I'm a big fan of side hustling, and there are certain things that you can do at home as well if you're kind of strapped for time. Like there's freelance writing, there's being a virtual assistant. So, if you're good with emails and scheduling and you know a little bit about kind of blogging and stuff, business owners are always looking for virtual assistants. There's social media managers. I would definitely focus on earning more if possible. And then I would also see if there's any kind of programs in your community that can help you out with your children, that can help you out in other ways, if you're not already on food stamps, or other ways that can help you kind of get through this time while you get back on your feet financially. I'm not ashamed of people, going to those resources when they need it. And I definitely did not think I was going to be on food stamps after graduating from NYU, but it really helped me during a difficult time, and it was temporary, and I was able to get out of that and do better. And so I would say focus on sustaining right now, feeding your children, being in good standing with your student loan debt, but focus on earning more where you can, both in your current job and any side hustles that you can take on.
Okay, one final question. Thank you so much, Melanie. Do you accrue interest while you're deferred on the income-based plan?
I believe you do. I think it depends, actually. We need to look into it, but I know that some loans, I think the interest is not accrued, and then I think for some there are. I would need to look into specifics, but I believe some of them are.
One last thing is that the person, you had suggested that the person that had the $100,000 eliminated because of a disability. She gave us permission to share her email. So if you want her contact information, go ahead and send me an email at rita@financialsocialwork.com.
Great. I would love that information as well, because I write a lot about student loans, and I think, sharing your story would be inspirational for other people who might be considering, how to do that. They might not even know that it is an option.
Melanie, we have lots of thank yous, people saying what a great presentation, and what a huge benefit it was. I want you to know that we all appreciate you and what you accomplished and what you shared with us today. I want to thank everyone who joined us today, and I hope we'll see you all back here next month. Thanks, everybody. Have a beautiful rest of the day. Bye now.
Thank you.